views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome, good people of the Bronx and beyond. My name is Christina Pagán, and I'm your host for A Life in Art. On this show, we will bring you engaging and personal conversations with artists with whom you may not be familiar, people who have been working on their craft for at least a decade and are at a crossroads where passion meets necessity. We'll discuss creativity and inspiration with our guest artists, but also find out what it takes to balance the struggles of practical life while pursuing their passions. Our guest today is a world-renowned hip-hop dancer and choreographer. He's been a principal dancer in companies such as Rhythm Technicians and Ghetto Original. He won a Bessie Award for choreography, and today is the artistic director of Full Circle Productions. Today we learn about Gabriel Kwikstep Dionisio's life and art. And we are on set with Kwikstep. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi.
So you are part two, basically. So we had Rockefeller on a few weeks ago. She happens to be your wife.
Yeah,
And she was talking up so much about your influence on her art, and so we had to have you on the show. So can you tell us a little bit about where you're from, what your background is?
I was born in Manhattan. I'm of Puerto Rican descent, and I'm definitely a 70s child. Love the past. I don't just dwell in it, but I use it to propel me to the future, so I'm aware of what's happening in the present.
So what does that mean? Like 70s is like the birth of hip hop.
Right.
Especially here in New York and in the Bronx and in Upper Manhattan.
Right.
Can you talk about a little bit of the influence of hip hop in your early years?
In my early years, it wasn't even called hip hop. It's
Right.
the things that I was visually watching in the street, like when I was taking the train, or we would be on the highway and coming into the Bronx or Brooklyn, the graffiti that I would see, which is very simple, like bubble letters or tags early on, and later on seeing bubble letters. And then when you're a kid, you're like, wow, cartoons on the wall,
Right.
As I began to understand that this was the signature of a people needing to be seen and heard, I started to understand I was part of something that was growing. And as a kid, it's instinctual. You don't know that it's a thing that is like gonna affect you as a people, but you're part of something special. It's instinct, right? Watching young kids being affected by what was happening on Soul Train, doing the robot, the block parties, the music out in the street and in the parks, the speakers, people just releasing to music that was really good for the soul. Those things heavily influenced me through music and dance. And at a young age, I started playing the bongo, because when you're a kid, I want to play, with you, Theo. No, hold these sticks. What are these? I'm playing with them, and the clave sticks, so I learned how to play those, then the bongo. And I think it was Canal 47 with the black cat playing the bongos. I think when the show closed, I was like, I want to play fast like that. It was a cartoon. That's how I was influenced by it. But all of those things wrapped up into one kept me away from what I was going through as a child, because I was a foster kid.
Okay.
And I was going through different homes. And, unfortunately, in the foster care system, you could be treated like a kennel dog. You know what I mean? You're just passing people by, man. I'll take that one.
Right.
It kind of feels that way. So when you have something to distract you, it was really amazing to me that it actually saved my life. And then the moment I started learning from the different art forms, I was teaching to the next person, because they were in the same kind of trouble I was, and I wanted to share what was affecting me. And I started doing the robot was my first dance, because it allowed me to escape.
You can be a completely different character.
I could be a different character, and so I related a lot to the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz.
Wow, that's a lot. That's
Yeah.
very intense. So like, with all the changes that were happening in music and hip hop, and you said you started as a musician mostly. You were playing instruments.
Yeah.
What got you into dance?
Just going to school and watching everybody dance and do the latest dances, But what really got me to dance was not only school, but the basement parties in my house. Salsa, and watching my sister hustle with my brothers, the dance called the hustle.
Right.
And get that straight, and different guests coming over. And I remember my mom. I was very close to my mom, my foster mother, and whenever anybody used to dance with her, I'd become extremely jealous, because I was always next to her, so I was always hugging on her.
Aww.
Somebody would take her up to dance. I'm like. So immediately I'm like, I have to learn how to dance. So she taught me how to dance salsa. And so when everybody asked her to dance, I'd be like, nope, she's taken, and I danced with her. Everyone thought it was cute. And then they push me to the side, and then she get her dance on. And then I had this competition with one of my cousins. Just, I guess it was a friendly competition. We didn't really like each other. He's from a different neighborhood. And so one day he was dancing, and everybody was paying like, oh, he's so great. And he wasn't that good to me.
Okay.
So I went down and I started doing my thing, and I started doing a robot. People were going crazy. And I was like, wow, this is a new way to get attention. And it was a circle that formed around me. And I thought that was like, wow, this is a new thing for me. I don't have to even speak, because I was very shy to speak. And so my voice was dance, and my backers were the music, So I felt like I had a family within music.
So you found your family in the Syph.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
My family was in the Cypher, and a lot of my family, and to this day, I feel closest to my street family, because I got a lot of the best lessons there and a lot of really good advice against some really bad choices. So because of the streets, I'm still here today, ironically.
I think it's interesting that you said as soon as you started learning, you were teaching
Right
away. Why is it important to you to teach the next person?
It's very important to me, because as a foster child, I wasn't being taught. And because I wasn't being taught, I was learning lessons the hard way. And I didn't want future kids who I was around to go through the same harsh lessons, because they can destroy you. But I knew this at a very young age, because I was being exposed to therapists at a very young age, because of all the problems you go through and the abuse and all of that. And so I would have very adult conversations with these therapists, and I got to see my profile. I was like, what's that, the profile? What does that mean? Oh, it's your story. Oh, I want to read my story. And when I started reading my story, I was like, wow, this is not good. I got to change this somehow. But as a kid, I wasn't talking like this, but in my mind, I knew the deal. And so whenever I could, I showcased my talents, my flipping, my dancing, my drawing, so they can report back, this kid has talent. We have to make sure that he goes in the right direction. And because my art, I was able to speak with my soul, and from that, I was able to speak with my voice. I had, stuttering problems. I used to murmur a lot, because every time I spoke for my rights as a foster child, with adults that you don't know, don't do that to me, or, you get abused. You know what I mean? Because they don't care. And I'm just being very real, because this is a very real fact. And for me, when people say, well, hip hop is this negative thing, no, hip hop culture is a negative thing when it's used just for an agenda to make money.
Right.
Hip hop culture, there's a difference, right? I said hip hop. That's a different thing than hip hop culture. And the cultural movement was to make sure that you had knowledge yourself, which is to me the most important, very unknown element of hip hop. People talk about the 4 elements: the graph, the DJing, the MC, the dance. But the 5th element is the most important. It's like being a driver to a car that has 4 wheels, but if you don't know how to navigate and know where you're going, you might as well just remain idle. So knowledge itself was very important to me, and I was gaining that before I even knew what hip hop was. As I got deeper into hip hop, and people were actually building in the cypher on the corner and talking about what needed to be done, what happened with the Black Panthers, the civil rights movement was over, but we're still somebody. Those things completely enamored me, and I was taken by that, because some of the best jams were when you were talking after the jam, because your chakras were completely open, you were free, you were on another level, and when you started to talk in that kind of, in that kind of atmosphere, everything was open for you to discover, and sky's were the limit.
That's beautiful.
So I think that's the beauty for me of hip hop, is that the street professors can get together and build and teach the next generation, because they're there listening to you.
Oh, Awesome.
And it's really important for me.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll come back to that.
Sure.
So we'll be right back with more from Kwikstep when we return.
Teachers today are finding new ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
And welcome back to A Life in Art. We are here with hip-hop dancer and visionary Kwikstep. So we were just talking about your early years. Can you talk to us a little bit about your very first break, your big break in hip-hop and dancing?
Let me see. I got to go through what they call the dark ages in hip-hop, when breaking was completely played out.
Right.
Nobody wanted to even do it. And one big reason is because it became really commercialized. And so the people kind of like were like, nah. Getting to when breaking stopped, it was like between 1985 and 1986. Now, mind you, I didn't start breaking in the 70s. I saw it maybe 78, 79, and I didn't even know it was breaking. And it was a very simple move called the helicopter. I was just attracted to that dynamism of that move, and I was like, I gotta do that. Later, when I saw it in '81 in Washington Square Park, I was like, yo, that's what I was watching. I need to do that. Plus the music was already familiar. I was like, okay. And it was dance, I was like, yo. Anyway, so when I started breaking, it takes you about 4 years to start getting good. If you're talented, you're good in those 4 years, you can start making your way. So I started in '81, and in about '85, I was like, I'm really ready to smoke some cats, man, because it was all about battling, right? And I was already making my way, and I was like, I'm really gonna make a name for myself. And people were already going on tour. In '85, people were on tour. I went to Puerto Rico, came back, people were like, yo, why are you still doing that? It was like within 6 months to a year. It was like a media dropped and all breakers were gone. And then my teachers were stopping, my mentors. And so my family was disintegrating. And I was really, really depressed. And I wasn't working. I went to school for graphic design. I wanted to go to art and design, but I couldn't because I lived in Jersey at the time.
Okay.
And so I went to Lafayette. And that's the only school you can apply to and transfer, right? So I was gonna make some moves to transfer to Lafayette High School, but I was a day late for the test. I wrote me a Koch. I did all I could. And I was like, damn, what am I gonna do? And I was really, really depressed. I had to get a 9 to 5. Breaking was not popular. All the other dance styles that were coming in were. I like doing those too, but there was nothing like breaking. And I remember whenever B and Rakim came out with their joints, and people were not breaking to it, and a lot of these had break beats in it. I was like, yo, what's going on? Why is nobody breaking? But like, what? And so I was like, what am I gonna do with my life? Then I get a phone call from this woman named Michelle who used to manage me from Brooklyn, because I'm originally from Queens and Brooklyn. And she said, do you want to go to China? I was like, what? What do you mean? She was like, do you want to go to China to break for 2 months? I was like, okay, what's the deal with it? She was like, well, you get paid, but you can only spend the money in China. You get paid in yen, but everything you buy, you can bring back.
All right.
I was like, damn, I can't pay rent. I can't pay my bills. All right, I'm going to do it. And the audition, when is it? She said in 3 days. I was like, I moved all my furniture and I practiced for 2 days straight because I needed to get this audition. And I went to the audition, and people who I knew were there. People from the Bronx. My friend Clown was there. He's a popper and a street dance veteran as well. And he's like, yo, I know this cat. Yo, this cat is, he's fresh. And so that was already a vote of confidence because I didn't know anybody. Long story short, I made the audition. Long story even shorter, I went to China and I was blown away. It was communist,
Right.
but they were totally taken by us in many different ways, negative and positive. So I went, And we went inside of a arena that had like 15,000 people in it. And we did our show, and we were bowing, and they were going crazy, and they said, can you take an encore? So everybody took the encore, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I went down, and I remember, breaking, and I went into some head spins, and I started going really fast because the adrenaline was like crazy in me. And the faster I went, the louder the crowd went. And the volume went higher and higher. And then I heard like thunderous noise. I was like, yo, what is that? So I got up, and what they did is they broke the barricades, and they came running down.
Oh my God.
And they started picking us up and hugging us and kissing us. And I was like, it started happening in slow motion. I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Because I realized that something that I've learned from the streets of New York City wasn't just about moves. It was about a movement of a people that was able to cross language barriers. And when we started doing workshops and working with Chinese acrobats, we weren't talking to one another other than physically. And I thought that was amazing. And I realized that this is something I wanted to do that was international, and it was able to move the world. And I understood from firsthand what Bambaataa had experienced, because they already had went on tour. And I'm like, I'm finally joining the ranks of what hip hop is capable of doing. I'm one of the soldiers, SOULJAHS, which incidentally is what Full Circle members are called, Full Circle soldiers. Because you got to be in the trenches to make this happen. This is not an easy gig, And so when I came back from China, I came back to Brooklyn, and I saw the hood in a completely different light, both positive and negative, both as a trap and as an endearing factor, but really got to know the difference between being ghetto and being from the ghetto. And that's when I really got to teaching at another level, and made my decision to make a non-for-profit. Actually, not even non-for-profit, a crew, but the crew had to be something deep, like Universal Zulu Nation. I'm like, that's an incredible entity. We need more of those. And so I came up with Full Circle because breaking is in circles, and life is such. And I wanted something that was gonna last forever. When I hear it, it reminds me of what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And so I came up with Full Circle, and then later on it became a not-for-profit, as I explained to my to-be wife at the time what my aspirations were. And later on it became a not-for-profit and a multidisciplinary production company, urban artistic disciplinary production company.
Doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
A little bit of this, film, theater,
Right.
because you mentioned rhythm technicians and Get Original. So when I came back from China, my friend Charles, who's from Coney Island, he took me under his wing at the time. I was a student of his. And he was telling his friends who he was on tour with, Lakatron John and Mr. Wiggles, who's from the Bronx, and John was from Brooklyn. Y'all know this kid named Kwikstep, you gotta check him out. And they were just starting a company called Rhythm Technicians. And their first gig that I did with them at the Criterion on 42nd on Broadway is a gig they included me on. And it was a theater gig, because they were all involved in theater previously in the very, very beginning stages. And Rhythm Technicians, together with Rocksteady Crew, became Rhythm Technicians and the Rocksteady Crew. And we wrote a play called So What Happens Now. And it was about two entities, one dance entity that wanted to get out of the ghetto, and the other dance entity that were drug dealers, but that were dancers. And they were all about that life. And this one kid who was me, who played that kid, was the kid who wrote poetry. And he was always being snapped on. But he got caught up in the drug game, and he got murdered. And in his sleeve, or in his pocket, was his last poem that he wrote, that they read. And it was all about, what the struggles that they were going through. And so I was primed for that and ready, because in high school I was studying acting and theater. I was breaking a lot, going against the grain because nobody was breaking. And I was at the right place at the right time when my brother, Charles Sanchez, introduced me to Lakatron John and Mr. Wiggles. And that was the beginning of the first introduction to the world of what hip hop theater was.
Wow.
It was by us. And then that Rhythm Technicians and the Rocksteady Crew turned into Get Original, because we didn't want to get into a fight over whose name was being billed first.
Right.
So we turned it into Get Original Productions.
Wow, that's a great place to stop for now. We'll come back to that. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more from Kwikstep right after this break.
Today, 1 out of every 4 American kids is Hispanic. Many of the future doctors who will care for us, the scientists and entrepreneurs of our country, can be your kids. And the Hispanic Scholarship Fund helps you prepare, plan, and pay for your kids' college education.
Teachers today are finding new ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
And we're back on A Life in Art with Kwikstep. So you've just created Get Originals with
I didn't create it.
with Rocksteady Crew and
Rhythm Technicians. Yeah, became one entity.
Became one entity. Can you tell me a little bit, though, taking a few steps back, how you got the name Kwikstep?
So when I first started, I loved Spider-Man. So they used to call me Spidey.
Okay.
And then I flipped all around school all of the time. Then it became show off because people started to hate me. But I couldn't sit still. I'm a hyperactive adult to this day. But then as I started to befriend people, and show them the skill I had, they were like, yo, this dude right here, check him out. And when I started doing my footwork, people were like, yo, he got real quick steps. He moves fast. The name stuck out, Quick. And I like the graffiti artist, Quick. I thought he was really dope, and just his style. And I stuck with that name for a long time. There's another song by a group called The Quick, and the song's called Zulu.
Okay.
The song is, I love that song. And when I introduced Kwikstep, they were like, that name fits you right there. I used to spell it Q-U-I-C-K. I used to write it in script, and Kwikstep. But the way I used to write it, it just looked like one big W, including the I. So I was like, I got to change this. So then I started with a K, U-I-C-K. They were like, no, got to change that. So then I changed it to W, and got right to the point, K-W-I-K, no E, no C. And it stuck, and it looked good, and it always reminded me of what I had to be in the ciphers when I got busy. And I had two ways of breaking. I had one way of sharing with the cipher what I was about, but if I had to show you what I was about, you got to see the real Kwikstep. Because when I dance, people say I'm really smooth and like, not mellow, but just nice and smooth. But when I battle, people tell me you're a completely different person. Now that's when the hood comes out. I'm like, and because when I battle, I come from the stages of battling when it was real and personal. The atmosphere was like thick, like pea soup. Anything could jump off at any minute, because this comes from the 70s and people were still under a lot of pressure. Like today, it hasn't changed, except there's a lot of cameras around, right?
Right.
So it became like a lot of the dancers that I knew, they had legendary mystique to them. Like some of these guys you heard of and you never saw them, but then if you happen to be at the same jam that they were in, and people say, let's say, yo, there goes Track 2, or there goes Ken Swift, or there goes, these are names you might not know, Float, Chino, Brian from Incredible Breakers. Like, what? Oh, there they go. And I wanted that.
Right.
I wanted to have that same mystique and influence on people. That way I can talk to them about my journey. Because I know people in the hood go through a lot, and they think that nobody is listening, and they feel alone. And I think through skill, when you start to forge your way, you show people, yo, there's something at the other side for you, but you have to work really hard for it. And this is what I went through, and this is who I am now. And people are like, wow, you went through that? And this is what you're able to do? Cool, man. And maybe you won't be able to be a breaker, but you could use the breaking skills as life tools to break through. Breaking to me was like, that's a great word, because it breaks you down, it breaks the mold, and you are reborn over and over every time we're breaking, because you have to get new moves, you have to reinvent who you are, because every 4 or 5 years is a new generation of breakers being born. And who are you in that new generation? Who do you mean to this new generation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations after you've been dancing. And in the 70s and mid 80s, a breaker stopped at 18, 19. I'm older now. I'm not gonna say my age, but it's kept me really physically, incredibly young feeling, and physically young, because when I get busy, people are like, there's no way you're the age you are. But I intend to be like what Bruce Lee and Yip Man are, like really physically fit at the age of like 50, 60, 70. And I've witnessed that, and that's another thing. When I went to China, I saw a guy on the beach practicing Tai Chi, And he was on one leg, and he just went back and touched his shoulders to the beach sand with one leg and just a complete arch. And he got back up, kept on doing his form. I was like, that's gonna be me. So when you witness that at a very young age, you're like, okay, those influences stay heavy on your mind. So according to the ghetto and what you're exposed to, more than likely is what you're gonna become if you're strong enough to emulate it, or if you're not strong enough to detach yourself from it. So it's a plus and a minus according to where you're at mentally and physically.
So we're almost out of time, so I want you to talk to us a little bit about why it's important for you to have something like Full Circle Productions with the different aspects, talking about like kids in the ghetto and learning their stories and things like that.
Well, Full Circle Productions, one, for me was important because it was a business that I owned as being a minority. And I think being a minority and you own your own business, you have complete control over your own culture and how it's, you know, spoken about, how it's shared, and you're completely responsible for the good and the bad. And as an example to the youth of what's possible, because a lot of times they go and work for somebody else. But to work hard for your own and your own people is even a greater gift and a greater challenge. But when you overcome those challenges and things come full circle, you learn something at a new level and you place something on top of that, the circle begins again. So by the time you're done, it's like a strong oak tree that has many rings to it, and all those rings have experiences that you can speak to and have an example to be to the next generation that comes after you. And you have things to show for it. Film, theater productions, TV appearances, interviews, articles. And long after I'm gone, along with Full Circle, my wife, whoever has affected the generations, all the work that we've done is left for the next generation to see forever. And media is very, very important. A lot of times we get into our oral tradition, which is incredible, but we need to start learning how to document all of those things and put it forth, especially as minorities. If not, we'll get washed away in the sands of time and nobody will know we ever existed. So it's very important for me to own my own production and get it out there as much as possible.
And just briefly, because we're going to end, you're in The Get Down, which is being filmed here in the Bronx.
More of my life coming full circle. So here it is, a production by Baz Luhrmann about the ghetto in the Bronx in the 70s and the beginnings of hip-hop culture. And I'm a 70s child, and I was like, I have to be a part of this. And like, you know, true to form, I don't have any connections like that. I just sent my resume out, my pictures to as many people as I could, and I get a phone call. And I even talked to the choreographers, Rich and Tone. I'm like, Rich, come on, man. I got to be a part of this. If you can make it happen, cool. If not meant to be, it's not meant to be, but I got to push for it. And sure enough, I got in contact, they contacted me through email to say, yo, we're happy to announce, man, we want you part of this production. And for me, just to be there and be part of a production that's paying homage to the beginnings of hip hop is a treasure to me. So look out for that. It's going to be really, really good.
Well, congratulations on that
thank you.
and all your future endeavors. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks to Kwikstep for sharing his life in art with us. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We want to encourage you to connect with us on social media. Visit us on Facebook and YouTube at A Life in Art, and Instagram and Twitter at A Life in Art TV. We'll be back with more stories from emerging artists when we return with A Life in Art.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.